So good morning, everybody. First of all, before I start with my presentation, I have to say it's really an honor being invited to this conference and to see this big audience interested in discussing the important topics that are on the agenda today and tomorrow. Furthermore, I have to say I'm really happy to see that this regional conference is organized already the second time now, where the stakeholders not only of one country or a couple of countries, but of a totally region come together to discuss and to agree on what is needed in the future. Furthermore, I have to say that I'm happy that this time I'm the first speaker, so afterwards I can lay back and listen to the other interesting presentations. So as you see on the screen, my presentation is based on two different surveys. The one is the survey on standardization, and the other one is the recent discussions taking place in the working group policy on e-commerce. So the content of the presentation is regarding the survey, how the survey has been done, what relevant topics has been identified, and to draw some conclusion from that. You may ask, this was a survey on standardization. Why to talk about standardization in that context? It's easy to say, because if regulators say we are interested in having measurement on special topics, that's an indication where they may be interested in the future. So it's a conclusion from a survey on what areas may be most important in the future. And as I said before, what was discussed in working group policy. So the outline of the survey was a questionnaire of 27 questions. And all the recipients were asked to indicate their level of consent to these questions, from 5, totally agree, to 0, we disagree at all. And as you see here, answered by 27 countries, and most of the countries participating today did answer the questionnaire. Thank you for that. But even though a response rate of 27 countries out of 33 active in SERB is quite a good response rate. So, how have future topics been indicated? So we choose the level of either the average is more than 2/3 of the maximum, so 2/3 of 5, which means 3.3, or if the sum of those who answered with totally agree, or so 5 or 4, if it was more than half. Now let's go to the topics itself. Starting with the letter post. There was an agreement that measurement of transit time for multi-operator scenarios, so in liberalized markets, may be very important, and that parallel networks may differ in study design, in geographical coverage, in products and promised quality. The same is true for the measurement of transit time for partial pipelines, so if you have more than one operator. And there, the reason is that it's necessary to identify the responsibility. What about downstream access measurement? There are joint ventures, cooperation between different operators, and cross-border cases. With the hybrid electronic services, the most important topics were also transit time and consistency. What about the time from sending the electronic transfer to the physical delivery, or the physical receipt to an electronic transfer? What about the time in weekends? Is there an unfair profit for the postal operators doing this service compared with the private ones, because the private ones don't have the possibility to scan, for example, the physical mail in electronic during the weekend? They only receive it on Monday then. What is about the choice of the recipient? How to get the message? Is there a good fulfillment of the contractual requirements? And last but not least, because it seems for me one of the most important points, is the security and privacy of data? How is the data storage organized? When are in hybrid make case, when are the electronic storages ended, and one, if it's received in hard copy, one is this hard copy destroyed. Now we come to the access. Distance to post boxes. That becomes more and more important together with the socio-demographic change. Elderly people use this service especially. And that is even more true for the distance to post offices. When I say here post office, that may not be the need to have a post office in the traditional sense. That may be in-shop solutions, agencies, postal stop points with basic services, but elderly people need a decentralized service in the future even more when they get older and older. And last but not least, in this access regime, the complaint service. There is a standard already available, that's 14012 in the SAN standards. But this standard only describes how something can be done. But it seems to be a need to have a minimum facility measurement, how guaranteed handle time is measured, what are external resolution regimes, and last but not least, because that's a requirement from the Directive 2, how the public is provided with information, how are statistics available. So the next topic then, and that comes more in line with the overall topic of this conference, parcels, because parcels is a part of this e-commerce business. The measurement of transit time, not only for track and trace services, because a lot of these e-commerce is done with low value goods, so just with small packets. Again, as in the latter case, we have the eventual need for measurement of transit time for multi-operator scenarios, so not only for the obliged universal service provider, and also for partial pipeline if there is a cooperation between different parcel post providers. Furthermore, on parcels, damage and theft is much more important than for letter post mail because parcels normally have a much bigger value of content. The same is true for wrong or incorrect delivery. It's more important than letter mail, and there is this notification case where it has to be guaranteed that no notification is issued whereas the recipient was at home. You know that's a big issue for complaints. Last but not least, is there a need to have parcel delivery boxes in the future, either by automatic delivery machines or by decentralized post boxes on the street where parcels can be delivered even though the recipient is not at home? Now I come to my conclusions. The survey indicated these areas, as you saw before. But not every sector needs sector-specific regulation. However, there has to be tools to be available to measure, either to enable the operator to measure them to know what is my performance, or to enable regulators to enforce measurements in case that they see that the market don't produce the results they expect. And it's up to the market players, so to the operators, to demonstrate that they are aware of their role in this competitive area and that they really meet the needs of consumers and customers. And it is essential for the regulators to have a good knowledge of markets in order to identify shortcomings. So in having said that, sometimes it's necessary to measure even if you don't have a regulation on that in order to get a good market overview. So now I come to my last point of the presentation, and that is the recent discussion in the Working Group Policy on e-commerce. And there are 4 topics identified. One is a payment channel. I was happy to hear that in Serbia, the PayPal is introduced recently. So that means there is in the future a secure electronic payment channel, and the cash on delivery should only be the exception if such channels are not available. Return services, free of charge is mentioned here. Of course, there is no free of charge return service. It's always already included in the price you pay before. But it should not be up to the receiver of a parcel to pay then an amount of money he has no knowledge before receiving or before deciding to send it back. And of course, then afterwards, the return of payment, which is especially in the cross-border case, a very big problem. The safety of products, I already mentioned before, packets without registration that are used more and more in e-commerce. And what about the trustiness of e-commerce shops? Should there be a certificate created on a European or worldwide level so that those who order goods via e-commerce can be sure that this shop is a trusted one and they are not given any low-value good for good money? So that brings me to my end of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for any questions.
Posljednji slajdovi su bili jako interesanti, posebno ovaj posljednji koji može da kaže vezano za način na koji će buduća elektronska trgovina počeo od obezbeđivanja elektronskog bezbednog plaćanja, da se pošiljke, ako dođe do nekih reklamacija, mogu vratiti bez ikakvih naplate troškova i naravno vraćanje novca koji je uložen, da se ovi ljudi koji se bave e-trgovinom dobiju sertifikate kako bi i oni koji kupuju, znači naravno korisnici ili potrošači, bili sigurni u tome. Ako ima nekih pitanja, ja bih zamolio da postavite gospodinu Dammanu, možete i na srpskom, imamo mikrofon, tako da će koleginice gore koje sede moći da vam prevedu da bi čovjek mogao da razume. Nema? Aha. Marijan Osvald.
Dobar dan. Drago mi je da mogu postaviti kolegu iz Nemačke pitanje na srpskom jeziku, a ja dolazim inače iz Slovenije. Zanima me, korisnici sve više sami traže način i vreme dostave, bude to pisma, bude to paketi i u stvari sami stvaraju pritisak prema poštanskim operaterima. Kako vi kao regulator gledate na to da je recimo pitanje univerzalne usluge i uslova obezbeđivanja univerzalne usluge nekako u kontradiktornosti sa tim zahtjevima tržišta? Hvala.
So if I understood you right, you address the question whether there should be a delivery prior to a certain time of the day, so not such late in the evening or for business in the morning and so on and so far. Yes, that has been a big discussion already, but as far as I know, there's hardly any country, I'm not aware of a country, who have introduced really a regulation on that. On the one hand, it is too a heavy burden to any, it seems to be too a heavy burden for any operator to organize his delivery scheme in accordance with guaranteed delivery times to a special kind of clients. So business in the morning, and most of the private people may would like to have, for example, parcel delivery after 6 o'clock in the evening when they are at home. So I'm not aware of that, and together with the falling volumes in letter mail, it's even harder to guarantee such a scheme where sometimes delivery areas are put together because of low volume and so on and so forth. So at the moment I don't see a chance to have introduced something like that. On the other hand, of course, as far as parcels are concerned, a possibility to deliver a parcel whereas the recipient is not at home, or to have a pickup station close to the address of the recipient is a big issue, and it's also a competitive issue. If I see, for example, in Germany, we have some 4 or 5 big parcel distributors in e-commerce, and each of them managed to have now a network where nobody has to go further than, let's say, 4 or 5 kilometers, even in the countryside. So it's a competitive advantage if you have such a network for petrol stations to store the package parcels for pickup there, or whatever. I hope that answered partly your question.